Have you ever enjoyed a piece of media that when a new thing comes out that's supposed to replace it, even though the new one is technically objectively better, it can't really replace the original for you? I know I have. I've been using the same toothbrush for the past 15 years, but my dog chewed on it last week, so I had to get a new one. But this new one, it's just terrible.
I think it's fair to say that a good soundtrack is one of the most important components in any video game. You can make the argument that most games do have a comparable soundtrack, and while not everything is necessarily a standout musically, you do see games where the music is a big part of the experience when you play the game. Tons of games have iconic soundtracks that become part of that game's identity, becoming so popular that it's used in media outside of the initial game's target audience. No matter what new things come from it, it will always be a standout representation of the game as a whole. But what happens if a game is remade for a new audience or in a new manner? Do you stay faithful to how the music was made for that original release? Do you make a brand new rendition of how that song was always meant to be, not free from any possible limitations it once had?
It always fascinated me what game companies chose to do in terms of remakes and how they would choose to remake soundtrack. It was fun seeing how they would take the original soundtrack and remake it for a new era. But no game was as prolific and as important to me as the game, the RPG that changed everything. See, this game is so good, I don't even have to take out of the packaging to enjoy it.
With the release of Persona 3 Reload, many fans were excited to listen to the new remastered soundtrack. Every single song had been updated with a new sound score and different instrumentals. The idea of new music for Persona 3 was interesting, given how unique of a musical score the original game had. With its mixture of standout J-pop upbeat music and off-key funk/rap, especially from rapper Lotus Juice, Persona 3's soundtrack cemented itself with its one-of-a-kind feel that hasn't really been replicated since.
Now, whether that's because it's an undoubtedly great soundtrack or because of retrophilia is really up to you to decide. Like, yeah, it's an iconic soundtrack, but you can make an argument for a bunch of games and their soundtracks on whether or not they're iconic and stand the test of time. I think if you limit yourself down to a single version of something, it can really deteriorate the value that it could have in a new aspect or a new light for new people to enjoy. Like, if Lotus Juice can request to rewrite lyrics after 15 years, man, I think anything is possible.
Persona 3 Reload wrote off high expectations from fans who had fallen in love with the original soundtrack. How do you improve from a game whose music is so tightly ingrained within its identity? How do you replicate a similar feeling of intrigue and melancholy that fans grew to know and love? Oh, Persona 3 Reload's soundtrack was written by Atsushi Kitajo, with some instrumental tracks written by original composer Shoji Meguro. Kitajo has been associated with the composition of Persona games for the longest time, credited with music from Persona 4 all the way to the score for this game. That being said, he wasn't the original composer for the original soundtrack. While Shoji Meguro did help with the composition for this game's music, it's clear he wasn't really the main guy at charge. That, alongside the extensive time that had passed since the original Persona 3 release, meant that this remade music selection would have some drastic differences compared to the original release. As mentioned previously, Lotus Juice not only returns as a male vocalist, but actually requested to make some changes to the vocal tracks and lyrics, citing that it would, quote, better fit the scene. It's definitely a bold choice, considering how long it was since the original. Furthermore, it would later be revealed that Asumi Takahashi would replace Yumi Kawamura as the lead female vocalist.
While disappointing, Yumi Kawamura is in her 60s, and a lot of the music that she sings is quite taxing for someone to be singing at that age. And I think a change overall is welcome considering the scope of this remake and what they want to do. It makes for a bittersweet end, but at the end of the day, you really can't be milking the same equipment or the same tools forever. Like, you have to change things eventually, and the things that you do change aren't really ever gonna sound exactly like how they were made all those years ago. As long as you don't change something for something else that's way worse just because you hate me.
Say what you will about the changes to the composers and music selection. You know, I get it, it happens. Changing the cover art to this, when the box art had such a fantastic rendition of the original Japanese PS2 cover art, especially when Ryota Nitsuma, one of the producers for Reload, said in an interview that the artwork went through several revisions to, quote, create a reloaded look. What's reloaded about this cover art then? The models are detailed and I like this overall composition, but it's just the characters in random ass poses that do little to show any character or personality outside of, yeah, these are the three main characters, so what?
Persona 3 Reload's soundtrack is like getting a letter from your dentist. You wait a month and a half just to be disappointed.
The Persona 3 Reload soundtrack wasn't available on streaming platforms until April 24th.
What the hell?
In fact, they were so insistent on making us wait for the soundtrack that unofficial uploads by Zeodyne were taken down faster than it took me to waste $200 just to have the soundtrack early. It makes no sense why we had to wait so long for the soundtrack to come out on streaming platforms. Most of the time, the soundtrack is released day and day with the game's release. The soundtrack for its standalone DLC, episode Aigis, came out right alongside it. Now, was there a reason for making us wait so long?
I'm crying.
2 bonus tracks are included on listening platforms only: Burn My Dread Reload and Deep Breath Reincarnation Reload. These songs don't play in the game. They're just available to listen to on streaming platforms as renditions of the originals? Okay.
I don't get why we had to wait so long for 2 songs. Some songs were actually available early before the deadline of April 24th. Why? If you're gonna prevent us from listening to the soundtrack, why not just block all the songs? Why have only some songs available and then other songs are you have to listen to them when the soundtrack comes out on April 24th? When the game had launched in February. It's not like they released the game partially, with post-story content missing which would later shamelessly be put in as DLC.
Oh. Hey, regardless, you could listen to the music just by playing the game. While it's not really the same if you're just itching to hear deep breath, you could still enjoy the music for what it was when the game launched. Now, did people enjoy Reload's soundtrack?
I'm just not a big fan of the Persona 3 soundtrack. You know, it's like, the fuck?
Hey guys, it's Raf. Overall, I do like Reload's versions of the music, but it's kind of weird how it's classified as the definitive version of Persona 3. I mean, there's even a Blues and a Revolver in my time. This game sucks. Now we're talking.
I mean, the Megami Tensei series has some of the best video game soundtracks of all time, right? Like, we're talking Shin Megami Tensei 1, Shin Megami Tensei 2, Shin Megami Tensei 3, Shin Megami Tensei 4, Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoners 2, Persona 1, Persona 2, Persona 4, Persona 5.
I mean, to me, I really like the soundtrack of Persona 3 Reload. I mean, it was really my favorite thing of all time, but sometimes I bought this thing today. I'm gonna test it out for you.
I thought the Persona soundtrack was great. What did you think, Tom?
Yeah, I don't play Persona 3. I only play good games.
Opinions on Reload's soundtrack was mixed all across the board. While the general reception was that the soundtrack was a phenomenal showing from Atlas Sound Team, many people did hold on to the notion that the original just had a better feel. With the overhaul in music design and sound direction, some songs changed tone in a way that deviated from the gritty, dark, melancholy nature that made the original so good. However, people did rave how the improved lyrics and melodic tone sounded better. People also enjoyed the new tracks as they fit in right alongside the rest of the new improved soundtrack and were honestly pretty great stuff.
Personally, I really love Persona 3 Reload's soundtrack. The trance-like vocals, the new instrumentals, the upbeat melodies that Asumi and Lotus Shoes bring are phenomenal. Despite many of my criticisms, I think they did an excellent job remastering and remaking a timeless soundtrack, which was probably pretty difficult. This is the first time that a mainline Persona game had its soundtrack revamped in a manner like this. Sure, Persona games did have some of its songs remixed in their dancing franchise games, but those are irregular side pieces not pertaining to the main turn-based action RPG series.
Not all of the songs are winners though, at least in my opinion. The new rendition of Burn My Dread, you know, the one they made us wait 2 months for, is good, but it doesn't capture the same emotion the original does.
This new pen doesn't hurt as much as this old pen when I hit myself in the head with it.
The differences are minimal. Like listening to both, they have the same beat and melody. It's not like they reinvented the changing season shaped wheel this is riding on. Despite this, it's different enough to make me notice how good we had it before. Burn My Dread has a raw opening with the guitar echoing in the background. The remake on Reload is the same, but the echoing and background are gone, which feels like they just missed the point of why that riff was there to begin with. I think that's probably the case for a good majority of the songs, and while its mixed opinions vary depending on who you ask, the one song that I constantly heard people discuss was...
Wrong song.
Mass Destruction is one of Persona 3's most popular songs, with it being the battle theme and all. Mass Destruction on Reload? It isn't terrible, it's just underwhelming. Like mentioned previously, everything is similar enough to have minuscule differences that really become noticeable considering how many times you hear it. Like, it is a turn-based RPG after all. I am leaving the fact that for Reload, you do have a whole ass new song that plays if you ambush the enemy. It's going down now. This song is excellent and really did wonders to the overall reception of Reload during release. I heard it being played anywhere and everywhere to the point where I kind of forgot about Mass Destruction Remake. And to be fair, despite what I just said, you only really hear Mass Destruction if you face an opponent head on or if you're ambushed. Two things that most players avoid anyways, because why would you put yourself in a position like that to begin with? All in all, I'd say Mass Destruction Reload was an okay remake that didn't live up to my expectations of the original. Despite this, it was excusable enough considering the new battle music that we got that most people listen to anyways. Mass Destruction release prompted conversation about the best battle music for Persona 3. The original Mass Destruction was and still is beloved by tons of Persona 3 fans. However, there is another version of Mass Destruction that was considered to be the pinnacle of battle music for Persona 3. Persona 3 FES is the re-release of Persona 3 on PS2, now with a new storyline following the events of the main game. While it's not detrimental to the main events of the story, it can be an intriguing dive as to what happens to the characters after the main game. When Persona 3 launched, fans were left wondering if we would ever get a remake of FES content for this game. Now seemed like the perfect opportunity to do it. And while the remastered Persona 3 Portable didn't get FES content, that's also a PSP release with its own separate mode based on which character you choose to play as. Lucky enough for us, Persona 3 Reload episode Aigis was announced with high expectations on a revamped campaign for a story most people didn't really get to experience, with it being a re-release on the original PlayStation 2. While people talked about the different things that episode Aigis would bring, I couldn't help but think about the battle music for Persona 3 FES.
Persona 3 FES Mass Destruction is my favorite version of that battle music out of any Persona 3 game. It's just the original, but the changes and the additions that they add to it make it so that it's such a new and fresh song, even though it's just the original with new lyrics and new sound effects here and there. While it's not a perfect song, I don't know why Lotus Shoes feels the need to turn into Jack Frost near the chorus section. I still think that it is unrivaled in any battle music song for any Persona game ever.
Would episode Aigis reuse the battle music for Reload? Would they go back to the drawing board and create something new? Would there be a reason for me to make a video complaining about how bad the song was to begin with?
No.
Alright, let's do this. This looks like a difficult fight. Hurry, kill, knock one down. Hurry, kill, knock one down. You can count on me. You're with me, right?
Why did they cut out the Lotus Shoes segment in the beginning? It sounds empty. There's nothing going on at all besides the music. The original Mass Destruction? That's more excusable because the original song doesn't have anything either. But here, I'm actively expecting it, and when I don't, man, I'm on live support. Lotus Juice finally decides to rap after a minute of silence. And yeah, it's typical everyday Lotus Juice. I don't think it's his best showing. I don't know, maybe I'm just a hater and can't stand seeing my favorite battle song done so horrendously wrong when it really didn't even need to be. Like, why even go through the changes? Why even change things if you're just gonna make it worse? The new soundstage also really doesn't fit this specific song, as I feel like I'm listening to two songs on two sets of headphones. Is it terrible? Yes, however, if you don't mind the original Mass Destruction on Reload,
What's wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Maybe I'm criticizing this song too harshly. Just because I don't enjoy it doesn't make it the worst Persona song. Now, do I like it? God no. I think the changes are terrible and I would much rather listen to the original compared to this rendition. But maybe there's some people out there that do like it. A bunch of the other songs in Reload were changed, and I like those. Are those also bad songs just because they don't sound as good as the original? I think each person is subject to their own opinion, and even if they choose to like something over something else, that doesn't make it fact, that just makes it their own personal preference. And you know what? I respect that. Maybe I don't understand things now, but if I keep on trying it, maybe I'll make sense of it in the future. Just lying for one final shot.
Oh, I don't play Persona 3. I only play good games. Like that one.